Hi everyone, it's Sarah, and it is April 2nd, and I'm actually recording our monthly update video on time. If you're watching this, you're interested in romance and romantic comedies, and I have some updates for you. So welcome. I have my notes, and a lot of what I have to share is what's going on behind the scenes and what's happening on Patreon. So, what am I working on? The last month I worked on a lot of behind the scenes stuff, getting ready for what is my prime writing season, which is kind of like April to January. February and March, I think in the future I'm going to consider them just wipe out, energy recouping, behind the scenes work, getting ready for the year kind of processes. Months, because that really is where my head needs to be after doing so much work to create the content that I want to share with everybody, and I hope you love reading. So, what is going on as of today? Romancing Mr. Tilney has launched on Patreon. This is your way to read this, at least for the next year, before it gets officially published. Now, I want to explain what's going on with the books and why I'm doing Patreon first. And I kind of said this to the newsletter members in one of my emails to them last month. By the time a book gets published right now, typically by the time when a book gets published, it's a big event. It is the launch of the book. It is the beginning of the journey between the author and the reader to share those books as a community. For my romantic comedy books right now, that's the end of the journey. A lot of fun stuff happens on Patreon or Ream, but we'll talk about that in a second. The interaction, the discussion, the growing into the book and seeing what people like and what people don't like, and the bonus content, and it's all happening on Patreon. These books are being serialized. This is, yes, early and exclusive access to them, but every book is serialized chapter by chapter. In this case, once a month, another chapter is getting published. And then 2 weeks later, we have the opportunity to discuss what I was thinking, what I wanted to accomplish, what I loved about the chapter. And this book, it's so tight and it was written so quickly, which I wasn't sure I could do. And now I've done it and I don't necessarily want to do it again. But I think that there's a lot to talk about in the decision-making process, especially because so many of us watch dating reality television. I have my own history with dating reality television. I don't like it right now, but mostly because I've just grown into my romantic cynicism and I like romance books as my way of fulfilling my romantic fantasies. So I spent a lot of the last 2 months getting Romancing Mr. Tilney ready, the cover design, the editing process, loading it up onto Patreon so that it just automatically posts and I don't have to stress about you missing a chapter or me forgetting if I did something. They're ready to go. Once a month, it'll automatically go out. You get an email telling you another chapter is ready to read, and then you can read it on Patreon. And the same thing will happen. And depending on your tier, you also get reminders about other content. What is the other content? This year, the other content is got a couple of things. The reader tier, that first paid membership tier where you read the chapters, that's the $3 one. That's getting all the short story bonus content from Sweeten Up Ginny Darcy. There are short stories there. There's some bonus content that I've made. So I'm pulling it out and we're just going to read those bonus short stories. What are those bonus short stories? I mean, look, I have it all written down. So, I have many places I've written these things down because I try to keep track of everything. So there's one story, the first one you're getting, which will be this month, will be about Jorge, who is from Pride to Prejudice and Pledging. And it's a character exercise I wrote about him many years ago, about him going to court after he has been arrested for stealing the Phi Pi's money and going to Mexico with Lydia and ditching her there. So it's a very short piece, but I want you to get in the Jorge mindset again, because Jorge's important. Then we're going to go into the bonus story. This one's a little more recent, but it relates to Sweet Neptune Darcy, the latest book out, and that is Eliot's prequel story. So you'll get to read that before I start promoting that widely. After that will be The Black Wedding. This will be a sort of disconnected story. It's a higher heat story about... well, if you read a little more Northanger Parks, you've met this couple. That was the end of their story, sort of, in relation to Katie and Ethan. But this is the beginning of the story. It is a book I wrote a story I wrote at the beginning of the pandemic, when I was like, this is gonna be fun, and was reading about past pandemics and weird things that happened. And turns out rural Jewish communities are not immune to weird. And I loved it. I loved what I read about what these communities did in response. These very superstitious rural communities. Not in the U.S. Well, maybe in the U.S. I don't know. But anyway. After that, we're going to get back into the 21st Century Austen series. There's a book called Threads of Love, which is about Carrie and Zach and little things he did. That will follow by the Friday Night Supper Club, also a story about them and things going on in Lecoq. And keep Lecoq and Jorge in your mind, because they're all coming together. And then the last of those is called The Fighting Gamecocks. And that is something that I think the higher tiers are just getting right now. Nope, they already got it. They got that last month. To read. So that will be the end of you're reading the later versions of this. And that is a Will and Lisbeth story. Let's always keep in mind the cock jokes. Cock jokes are critical. So those are things that reader tier is getting as bonus content on top of those on top of the book itself. And then the fan and super fan tiers will have new short story content to read on top of it, because I am working on short stories and character profile work for future things. But the really big thing is that the superfan tier, is getting the Yom Tov series re-edit. Now, this is one of the things I love about indie publishing. And as I grow as a writer and my writing gets better, I look back at work and I'm not satisfied. And in traditional publishing, that was it. You were stuck. The end. But in indie publishing, we have the ability to go back and finesse. And sometimes rewrite, like I did with Pride, Prejudice, and Pledging. Not only have I retitled most of these books, recovered all of these books, some twice, I have also re-edited, rewritten these books. And I love going in and adding more detail, more nuance, more description. And it's time the Yom Tov books got that as well. As I go back and I look at them, I realize there were so many missed opportunities to really flesh out Asher, especially, and Jenna, and what Jenna is thinking in those early moments of the first two books. So we're starting with Pour and Fling. Those members are going to get to read a few chapters a month. It depends on how quickly I move. My schedule right now is that in April, they will be able to read chapters 1 through 5. These are going to be very rough cuts of my re-edits. Very unlikely to be what is finally put in a new edition of the book, but this will be on our way to a new edition. And these are high heat. We talk about sex, not necessarily the description of the act, but the feelings and sensations around them. So this is not for the ones who want the sweetness. This is for the ones who want the heat. And I will give a lot of warning. I'm going to see if, so you get an email with a lot of the content in it, and then go and read more. I'm going to see if I can do some lead up, and that will be what shows in the email, so that you don't open your email and be like, sex scene. That doesn't actually happen often in the books, but it does. So I'm going to see how I can keep the emails to people clean, so that if you don't want to read the spicy stuff, you don't have to go into the Patreon to read them, but you will. And I might have a superfan tier without the heat, so that you can opt in or opt out just because heat's coming, people. We're doing heat. So I'm re-editing Pour and Fling on the time. It's also Camp National Novel Writing Month, but I'm working on a fantasy book. So when I can't process the fantasy book, or my brain wants to focus on something else so that I don't burn out, it's Pour and Fling I'm going to. And I'm about halfway through. I did start working on this in March to sort of like grease the wheels of my brain for writing again, so it was nice. I do have some short stories planned. The ones that are coming up are some bad dates. So what I have planned is that each of our heroes has something that I call a bad date. The one for Frederick has been written for a very long time. These are very unique stories because they are written in second person. This is happening to you. That's how it's written. The idea was that these were going to be personalized first dates between you and our romantic hero. And I'm still kind of playing with that because we're keeping that format. You are going on a date with Frederick, and it is a disaster. And it is not your fault. It is his fault because you are not his perfect partner. You are not his happily ever after. These typically take place shortly before he decides to get his happily ever after. And in terms of Frederick's story specifically, it's the bad date, Frederick hit send, and modern persuasion, right in that order. They just flow from one to the other. So those, I sort of work on them every so often when I just need to clear my head. We're going to do for all our romantic heroes. We will end, if depending on when this all happens, we will end with Mason from Citation Needed, but we will then consider some of our other male characters who need a bad date or two. Maybe Charlie from Pride, Prejudice, and Pledging, maybe Patrick, or there are just so many men who deserve their happy bad dates before they get their happily ever after. And there could be some that that we just didn't anticipate were going to be bad dates. But we all have bad dates, so we all know what a bad date feels and looks like. And I really have had fun thinking of what those would be. And the super fans are going to get to decide the details of the bad date, the who, the what, the when, the where, the why, how, things like that. So if you're really interested in shaping these stories and exploring these characters in a deeper level, the Superfan tier is the one for you, because that's where it's going to happen. There's also going to be a couple of short stories. When the bad dates are done, they will be an ebook that will be released as sort of an output of this. This will be for sale on Amazon and all the other platforms, but it's really going to be something that everybody gets for free within the Patreon system. So those are the short stories planned. I am looking at my list of, I have set up the Kanban board. I'm going to show you as best as I can. The Kanban board for the second quarter of the year is all set up. And I've got 2 stories that I'd like to write that aren't the bad dates. And one is Oscar's prequel story. That's our Oscar, Romancing Mr. Tilney's Oscar. The other is how Jack and Layla Dreyfus meet. Those are Elizabeth's parents from Pride, Prejudice, and Pledging. And they have their romance story that she really sort of wanted in her own way. So what was that? What is the relationship that they have that she has fantasized about? I've always wanted to write this. I know what it is. It's in my head. It's been there for a while. It involves food because Jack is a chef. So, so that's there. And then Oscar's prequel story isn't the bad date, surprisingly. It's not his bad date. It is how he got on this reality show. What happened? How did he get to be the last minute contestant that was just supposed to go home right away? So I'm very excited to work on all of these short content things for you. There are the stupid haikus. I have a list of 8 that I want to write this next year that I think people will enjoy. Those go up once a month for all of our tiers. That was when we got to a certain amount on my Patreon that got released. So that is there. I am also getting ready to start rewriting Citation Needed in May. That is because I told you this is my writing season. Camp National Novel Writing Month was fantasy. I will start rewriting this in May. My hope is for late summer or fall to be done so that some people can read this for me, especially sensitivity readers. This won't go to the editor until 2025. One, this is a money management thing more than a timing thing, but it does give me more time. So just so you understand how this works financially, most of this comes out of my pocket. At this point, I do not make enough money on Patreon on these books to cover my expenses, and that's fine. I have a system in place to put money aside so that I can afford to do this. But that means I need to be very strategic about how I spend money where and when, and working with the professionals that I like to work with. Beth, who has been editing she edited Sweeten Up Janie Darcy, she's edited Romancing Mr. Tilney, and she edited the rewrite of Pride, Prejudice, and Pledging for me. So I like working with her. I like the work she's done. I'm still friends with Indu, who edited so many of the other books, but this was Indu was not available. I found a new editor, and she fits my budget. But I need to make sure I have that money saved, and I don't want to be rushing this one. Obviously, this was supposed to be the book you were reading now, and I am very anxious about it because our main character is a wheelchair user, and I'm trying to empathize and sympathize and imagine a life that is not something that, even if I spend a day in a wheelchair, I will never fully understand. But I can tap into people in this community who use this assistive device for their own lives to understand what she might be experiencing. How angry should she be? How resentful might she be? Or would she be excited about things? And how that might relate to her relationship with Mason, especially one where he has rejected her after proposing, because that is their story. So I want to make sure I do right by Penny and right by this community, in the sense of as right as I could possibly get it, because I will never get it, because this is just not my experience. And that's not to say someday it will or won't be, but for now, when I am writing this is the perspective I'm just not going to be able to do. But her story really, her being in a wheelchair just makes a lot of sense for the story and who she is and what happens. I've tried to take out different details and move things around and switch, and I keep coming back to this core idea of the two of them, his rejecting her, that making her angry, but also wanting to there's so much that her being a wheelchair user, that changes if she's not in a wheelchair and needing assisted devices. So I want to make sure I do this right. So we're starting that work in May. The more time I have with that story, I think the better it can be. It gives my sensitivity readers time to really give me their feedback and for me to incorporate it fairly, etc. So that will be May, and that will probably not get to Patreon until next summer, only because we'll be at least a little over a year on Romancing Mr. Tilney, and I don't want to overlap these stories too much. Though the superfan readers will get to see early drafts of this because they're the superfans, and they're going to be able to give me feedback as well, just as a second set of eyes. So that's what's going on. Now, I mentioned that the Patreon is not just a Patreon anymore. I have added the Ream platform, REAM. Reamstories.com it's a serialization platform just like Patreon. You pledge a certain amount a month and you get content in exchange. It's the same content you get on Patreon. It's just a different platform. Instead of just reading entries, you will have a book to go and read and reread easily as if it were another ebook. It's just that you don't have access to everything till I release it. So There will be content there. I'm still getting it launched. I'm having a little fun with some AI art for the tier logo. I'm remaking icons with this in mind. So it's just something I didn't get to finish putting together until before the beginning of April. But my hope is when I need a distraction over the month, that this will be something I can easily come back to and get rolling again. So I will have links in the description below to both the Patreon and the Ream and my webpage, which I am in the process of updating because why not? But also it's been so very long since I've updated it. So I've rewritten blurbs, I've rewritten my bio, want to make sure the right covers are up, want to make sure the right links, because we've gone from just Amazon to all sorts of platforms, make sure that the audiobook links are up to the YouTube audiobooks. Like there's so much that I've forgotten to put on the webpage because it's not a priority. I need to get that done just so you have a central place to go and find the links to everything. There are links to the Ream on there, and I think there will shortly be an announcement about the Ream platform as your way to also engage with Romancing Mr. Tilney and every other book after that, because once Romancing Mr. Tilney is over, then we do Citation Needed. Short story collections are going to be developed there. The next series, The Knitters of the Table, these are romance stories for women of all backgrounds, experiences, and romantic journeys. Some will be widows, divorcees, never married. There's one character who's still married and reviving a marriage and romance after years of semi-living separate lives because they have adult children but are still professionals in the workforce. So I'm very excited about what's coming. I hope you will be too, and that you'll join us on Patreon or Ream and get a little deeper into the stuff I've been working on so you can read everything before anybody else gets to read the book. That's it for April. I'll see you in May.